Now, for the first time since April 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit the global oil industry, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries has increased Nigeria's production quota from 1.766 million barrels per day in June to 1.799 million barrels per day for the month of July. This development comes after the Reuters survey disclosed that Nigeria's crude oil production witnessed increasing production levels in the month of May after multiple laggard months, rising by 70,000 barrels per day and averaging 1.42 million barrels per day in May. Now, the new oil drilling limit increased Nigeria's production deficit by an estimated 400,000 barrels per day, since the country had only been able to produce about 1.4 million barrels daily of the 1.8 million barrels per day ration. Well, joining me to understand the impact of this development on Nigeria's oil and gas space, and as by extension, of course, the entire economy, is an energy lawyer and analyst, Dr. Ayodele Oni. Dr. Oni, thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much for having me. Always good to be here.
Yes, at that meeting late last week, I'm sure you monitored, of course. Now, what were you expecting? This increase, what does it really mean for Nigeria? We've not been able to meet up with even what we were given before now, the quota before now. So, is there anything new or special about this?
For me, there's really nothing special about this. There's nothing new. I mean, it's a cartel. Usually, cartels want to control price by looking at how they can manipulate, for lack of a better term, quantity. So, I mean, gas oil prices have continued to go up. So, everyone had to have an increase in their, or a number of producers needed to have an increase in production so that that price will stop going up, or at least the rate at which it increases then slows down. That was the idea. But unfortunately for the country, because of several issues, we've not been able to meet even our old quota, speak much less of that 27,000 barrels per day increase in our quota. I think it's about 27,000 barrels per day increase. So it's nothing new to the extent that we can't produce that much. It's not of much advantage to us economically and otherwise.
And we continue to suffer oil theft and all of that in the Niger Delta region, pollution and all of this. Now, we see this action by government in recent times by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited and the ministry trying to look for ways to address this ugly trend. In your thoughts, what are the ways, what ways could we actually fight this ugly development? I'm talking about vandalism here, pipeline vandalism and illegal refining, which is eating deep into the oil and gas space. It's all proceeds that are supposed to be coming from that space.
Yes, that's a good question. What I usually say for issues such as that is having an integrated solution. And usually I'm one for not saying you fight things. I'm one for saying you find a way of making it either not attractive or a way of working with the other side. For example, and I'm sorry to be taking you away from this topic to the topic of corruption. I always say don't fight corruption, just make it unattractive. Privatize what needs to be privatized. You know, if you make it less attractive, then it will reduce. In relation to energy theft, particularly oil and gas, oil theft, crude oil theft, one thing I believe can be done is to maybe make some of those refineries, license them, and see how they can work with government. That's one. Two, let the host communities have more stake. As long as the host communities, and I'm not necessarily speaking about right to the crude or having more revenues. You know, there are ways you can ensure that they have more stake, and it then makes they would ensure that, because they know these people, many of these host communities, local government chairmen know these guys. So if you work with them in an integrated manner, then you will be reducing that. That's another point. You know, another thing you think about is that may even be why you hardly see kidnapping and all of those. Many of those guys who did that are now in those illegal refineries. A lot of them do oil bunkering. So try see how those can be made unattractive. In the extreme, see how you can work with them. Maybe make some of them that are currently illegal, regularize them, and then let them pay taxes and all of those. And let them deal with the crude for local use, particularly refined products. You can work in such a way that if the quantity that is supposed to be reserved for local use can be refined by those guys. And then, of course, use of technology. That's what everybody else uses in the world. If you use technology, if you provide jobs, if you generally make the economy more robust, these are solutions. And of course, because the host communities, like I stated, do know these guys, if you give them more stake, and if you work with those guys, you should be able to reduce crude theft. Otherwise, it's a very difficult thing.
Interesting stuff. Now, a report from the NBS shows that we've spent about 1.51 trillion naira in importing PMS just in Q1 of 2022. This is against the backdrop of a high crude oil price that some countries are enjoying at this time, but it's all negative for us in Nigeria. Let me go into specifics. In January, we did 210 billion naira. February, 219 billion naira, and in March, 245 billion naira. What do you think? What is your reaction to this? How do we continue to sustain this 1.51 trillion in a quarter to subsidize PMS?
Well, it's not sustainable. Like I always say, it's fiscal rascality to continue to do that. We have a negative balance of trade and balance of trade payment overall. When you go to the oil and gas sector, particularly crude, as long as you continue to sell your base resource and buy value-added products, you can never break even. You can never really be prosperous. There's always this argument whether Nigeria is a rich or poor country. Nigeria is a poor country, but with the potential to be extremely rich. If you look at the infrastructure, a lot of these countries that also have oil and gas have built and are now relying on those even more than crude. Because with time, everyone's talking about decarbonization and all of that. It doesn't seem to bode well for us if we don't begin to look beyond this. And even for the short to medium term, we need to fix value addition. And one key way of fixing value addition is the refineries and infrastructure. You need pipelines. You need even other options beyond beyond oil pipelines to be able to deliver crude. And even refineries. Really, you should probably even have refineries closer to where you produce the crude. That would also even goes back to the question around reducing oil theft. But that's not something you can do in the short term. So it's not good news, to be honest. It's not very good news for us. And it's been like this for a while, actually.
And it's not
sustainable.
Yes, we expect Dangote's refinery to also come on stream anytime soon, or maybe early next year. But the NNPC has also come out to say that the Port Harcourt refinery, which I think about $1.5 billion has been put into that facility to revamp, re-energize that facility, is to come up around November this year, according to what we are hearing. If this happens, what level of impact will this have on this you call fiscal rascality, spending on subsidy payment?
Okay, it would have some impact. It will have some impact in the sense that it will reduce our tendency to always rely on imports. Now, I'm not sure it would suffice. I don't think it would suffice to meet all of our needs because there are 4 refineries. And I think in total, they just are about what we require. So if you have only one being available, it then means there would be maybe 10 or 20% of what we require. So we will still substantially rely on imports, but we will be on our way to being self-sufficient. That's the much you can have. And I'm aware government is working on raising funds for the remainder. so that we can be self-sufficient. I mean, particularly when you then work with the Dangote refinery, which would have both local and would be able to export, would have the export element. So yes, it should improve things slightly.
Hopefully, that will be a very good one. Let's go a little bit to the global space. The European Union has agreed to ban 90% of oil imports now from Russia. That's by the end of the year. We're part of sanctions against Russia for invading Ukraine. What do you think? What does this mean for the oil market and, of course, even the gas space, which Nigeria should be playing big this time?
Yeah, I mean, globally, it could mean that prices continue to go up.
Of course.
Depending on two other things. What OPEC does in terms of outputs and quotas, and secondly, whether you have sufficient number of members of OPEC who can meet their quotas or maybe even exceed the same. And what Saudi Arabia does. You know, Saudi Arabia has a way of, at times, having those prices go down if they flood the market, you know. So it's not automatic that the prices will continue to go up and very quickly. It will depend on some other factors like what Saudi and a number of other countries do, what the OPEC does, and whether you have sufficient number of countries to fill that gap. Otherwise, prices will continue to go up substantially. But if factors work contrary to those, then it may still go up, but it would go up at a fast rate.
Let me ask you this question, Dr. Oni. You're a player in this industry and, of course, a professional. You see the NNPC, interfering or coming into some deals. The latest one was the Seplat deal that happened lately, and the NNPC came with a better offer, saying that now NNPC is out to make money and not just a corporation. It's limited. Now, do you think that all of these moves by the NNPC will strengthen or help us achieve that energy security that we want? We also know of their shares in the Dangote refinery. All of these moves by the NNPC, what does it mean for the sector?
Okay, generally speaking, I'm more for private enterprise. Now that NNPC is becoming more or less a commercial enterprise, it should play like everyone else. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you stand and how you look at it, many of the joint operating agreements have what you call a preemption right or a right of first refusal. And there are two debates. There's the first debate that it's only when you transfer participating interest that the NNPC can exercise that right of first refusal so that they can match whatever the counterparty brings to the table. Now, what some of these guys who intend to divest are doing now is that they are doing at the corporate level, so that they are doing share transfers, share transactions, and not transfer of participating interest. But people would also argue, some would say, if we look at the mischief was, if you want to change control of those assets, those oil and gas assets, is what the JOA seeks, that the JOA being the joint operating agreement seeks to do. So whether you do it as a share deal or whether you do it as transfer of the participating interest, it still amounts to the same thing. And the jury is still out on that. Now, speaking of energy security can be looked at from two perspectives: security of energy supply and security of energy demand. Security of energy supply means you would have sufficient energy. Security of energy demand means you would have enough people buying your energy when you produce. Now, it will also even be whether you are able to produce as much as you should. Like, look at Nigeria, the issues we have with producing as much, meeting our quota. Now, with what NNPC is doing, it may be a challenge for deals in the future because everyone is going to be hesitant to spend money for lawyers. I get involved in some of these deals at times. That's why I can't say certain things. You spend money for consultants, you do certain things, and at the end of the day, NNPC then comes to exercise its right of first refusal. You try to change your strategy, NNPC still does the same thing. It may make deals not attractive, but it may also improve, nonetheless, it could improve our security of energy supply, depending on how you look at it, because if you don't have enough private enterprise, in the long run, would it be sustainable in terms of one company doing all of the deals? I doubt that it will be. So in the short term, it may look advantageous, but in the long term, I'm not sure it's the best way to go about it. And I believe some of these IOCs and some of the players in the upstream industry will begin to consider renegotiating some of these contracts, particularly the JOA.
And finally, our PIA, which we all waited for. We have it now, but all of the delays and politicking, it seems the implementation might continue after the 2023 elections. Or what do you think?
Yes, I think governance has stalled to a large extent because of politicking. Maybe after the primaries today, tomorrow, the APC primaries, maybe governance can then continue. But yes, a lot of implementation, even in the gas aspect, certain things ought to have been done, I think 6 months after the passage of the bill, and a number of other obligations that have been triggered. And some of these have just stalled, So I think it's because of the politics. I think governance is gradually grinding to a halt. But once these primaries are over, I think things should pick up. Maybe not at the rate at which they should have been, but I think things should improve and implementation should also take off.
All right. So considering all kind of scenarios that we find ourselves, do you see us achieving a stable and balanced market for the crude oil market and, of course, refined products? Moving on. Yes.
In the short term, not really. But in the mid to long term, I have a lot of hope in this country, and I have a lot of hope in the hydrocarbon sector. But once we're at that, we need to begin to think about decarbonization. We need to think about issues such as net zero. We say gas is our transition fuel. We need to begin to do more with gas. So I think whilst we're at that, we should also begin to think about the future. Because, they said the Stone Age didn't end because we stopped having stone. So the age of crude will not necessarily end because crude no longer exists. But it's important. Everyone begins to talk about EV vehicles, electric vehicles, and all of those. So we need to also be looking at the future, have an eye on the future. Thank you.
I must thank you so much for your time. Energy lawyer there and analyst, Dr. Ayodele Oni. Thank you so much for shedding light on OPEC's move and, of course, the entire crude oil, gas, and, of course, actions of the PIA, what it means for Nigeria. Do enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me. Enjoy the rest of your day, too.